And finally, we're getting into most important part about portrait retouching, dodging, and burning. I don't really think, as many people think, that it's most important part of every retouch. Though when it's about portraits and beauty, this will be a really important part to work on your skin. When it's about skin retouching, dodge and burn for sure is most important part of this. In Photoshop, you have tool dodge and burn. Forget about this because it will be distractive. It will not give you the results that gives you, for example, curve adjustment layer technique that I'm going to show you, and I consider this technique as the easiest and the technique that gives you the most control. But let's start from the beginning. What's dodge and burn? Why we do this? Dodge and burn been in photography for ages, and simply speaking, to dodge means to brighten the image, especially when you have some dark shadows on the skin, and to burn means to darken the image. As you can see over here in this area, I have some bright areas that's supposed to not be bright. So dodging and burning is simply working with lights, and using lights, we're going to make the skin even out. We're going to even out the imperfections on the skin. Right now, maybe it's not so clear, but starting from what needs to be done, I'm going to desaturate the image. So for this, I always use hue saturation, and I'm going to desaturate this, and also I'm going to change blending mode, so it's going to represent the right luminosity values of the image as they are, because normal blending mode doesn't really represent and shows the colors as well. We want to see just lights on the image, not the colors. Okay, now it's quite visible, so I can show you this on empty layer. I'm creating empty layer. I'm going to call this help layer. And what needs to be done with the lights? Let me choose a brush. And first of all, here you can see huge area. And this area, maybe I'm going to show you by blue color. Here, of course, this needs to be darkened, obviously. And also, let me switch into red color now. Around this, we have some of the little dark areas, and this will need to be brightened. Also, when it's about burning, here especially around the dark spots, we have some of the areas, as you can see, that all need to be burned. So these areas needs to be darkened. When we darken them, the image will appear even out, the skin will appear even out. Usually I do much more dodging, that's how it is, and most of the people do mostly dodging, and you can see there's many areas that has to be done that way. Here we will have a lot of these areas. Here, as you can see, appear very soft things, so I'm just showing you how which areas should be done. I believe it might be not so easy at first to find such an areas. Here maybe just a little bit to knock it down. I believe finding these areas, it's not always so easy, but I will try to do this the easiest possible so you can see how I work to make it easy to work easily with it. If this hue saturation layer is not enough, I usually use more curves to darken the image and to bring up some contrast, for example, like that. And when we do like this, when we increase the contrast, as you can see, all of the imperfections are much more visible. So we would work maybe around that, though using contrast is quite dangerous for you to not overdo the image, because you see things much more than they are in reality. So you can actually overdo the image. Make sure that when you work with huge contrast, you do this very softly to not overdo the image. Okay, that's the words of introduction. Actually, I'm going to give you this help layer as an action, as well as my dodge and burn layers. This help layer is a little bit too dark, so the darken can be turned off, and you can easily operate with curves that exist over here. Okay, so we darken the image, but about dodging and burning, I didn't show you how to work with it using curves. Simply, I create two curve adjustment layer. Let's copy this one by pressing Ctrl or Command and J to copy, and the one adjustment layer will be dodge, so brightening. I know it's a lot of information, and another burn. So this dodge layer will be layer where we actually brightening up the image. So pull up the curve to make it brighter, but it cannot be visible right now. So what to do? You have to invert this layer mask right now. So I'm going to press Ctrl or Command and I, and I'm inverting this. So now it's invisible. So not sure if you remember, but everything what's black on the adjustment layer is invisible. So now I make this invisible, and everything what's white is visible. So we can switch between black and white adjustment layer by pressing Ctrl or Command and I. And then when I paint with the brush white color, as you can see, I bring back the white effect, the brightening effect that exists over here by painting the white. And we can see how it looks on the layer by pressing Alt Option, and you can see how I painted, and that's what I did on the image right now. So of course I don't want this. Let's do a step back. And now I'm going to the burn. So burn is to darken. What I'm doing, I'm going down. I'm dragging the curve down. And now, once again, I'm going to invert this, Ctrl or Command and I. And this time, everything is black, invisible. And if I paint with white brush, I darken. So, as you can see, this is the main difference between dodge and burn. So, of course, we have to adjust our brush for retouching. I keep my brush. You can download this brush. It's a very soft-edged brush, and flow is between usually 2 or 5%. It depends of how do you prefer. So I can activate my help layer right now, and let's see what's going to happen. This area is dark, so as I mentioned before, this area has to be brightened. So don't be too perfect. This is just portrait image. Of course you have to be perfect, but you have to remember this image cannot be even out. And okay, I think it's enough. Let me turn off my help layer and have a look before, after. And I believe right now how the dodge and burn works is very clear. Now I can switch into burn and paint over here in the areas that have this rough area caused by the tiny hair. And here we will have to be very careful. I'm just going to paint a little to show you this example, and maybe dodge over here, and have a look. With burn we did this, and with dodge this. And that's how we'll look all the image, and I will be supporting myself with this black and white help adjustment layer. Also, other thing, what happens with dodge, and I will increase the flow to 100. Sometimes when we paint, especially on the brownish kind of quite saturated skin, the areas that we dodge might appear slightly more saturated, and the areas that we burn slightly less saturated. This is not rule, and actually if you don't press too hard with your brush, you should not have issues. Many people even doesn't correct their saturation values because simply they do not appear. Though I created my actions that resolve certain issues, and they are built basically as, let's see, I create a curve once again, I invert this, or not actually, not invert right now, and let's call it dodge. And right now to desaturate, to the values, as you can see, it's more saturated, I create hue saturation, and just randomly try to lower some of the saturation. It's not the rule, so I'm going to call this desaturate, and for now I can just turn this off. But if later I can see that the values are not correct, I can activate my desaturation layer, and this I put to the group Control or Command and G, and this will be dodge. So now to create layer mask, I have to hit here, creating layer mask, and invert, and this will be the same rule. As you can see, if I paint on this like that, and let's say right now I'm noticing that the area appeared more saturated. As you can see, I can try to adjust this saturation value to the rest to make sure that it's not actually appearing more saturated. So that's how I work. Of course, I don't ask you to follow me with the saturation step. You can sort this out on your own, and maybe you don't press too hard, maybe you don't have issues with the saturation, and this will be absolutely up to you. I will be using my actions dodge, which looks exactly the same as you can see, dodge action, and burn. If it's about burn, as I mentioned to you before, the burn areas make skin desaturated, so I rather saturate them slightly when there is such a need, maybe around this value, just a little bit. As you can see, most of the skin doesn't have these issues, so we can sort this out very easily. So right now, my actions, you can use my actions, you can build your own actions, that will be up to you. And right now we will be ready to paint with the white soft brush with soft flow or opacity, if you prefer, to even out the skin values. If you are not sure about the differences between flow and opacity, next lesson will explain you this to make you know what you are actually doing with your image.
Yeah.